It all started with the small things. The things that, at first, you tell yourself are nothing to worry about, just the natural ebb and flow of married life. But deep down, I knew something was off. The warmth in Sarah's eyes that once greeted me at the door had dimmed, replaced by a distant, almost hollow look. Our conversations, once lively and filled with laughter, had become stilted, marked by awkward silences and half-hearted responses. I remember the first time I really noticed it. I had come home from work, excited to share some news about a new project I was leading at the IT firm. It was the kind of thing Sarah would usually be eager to hear about, asking questions and offering her enthusiastic support. But that day when I started talking, she barely looked up from her phone. "Hey, Sarah," I began, trying to sound upbeat despite the nagging feeling in my gut. "You'll never guess what happened at work today." She looked up briefly, forcing a smile that didn't reach her eyes. "Oh, what happened? We finally got the green light on the cybersecurity project. They want me to lead the team," I said, my voice carrying the excitement I felt. "That's great, Jacob," she replied, her tone flat and distant, her eyes already drifting back to the screen in her hand. For a moment, I just stood there, holding on to the fading thrill of my news, now dampened by her lackluster response. This wasn't the Sarah I knew. The woman I married would have jumped out of her chair, thrown her arms around me, and told me how proud she was. Instead, she seemed more interested in whatever was on her phone. I sat down across from her at the kitchen table, trying to reconnect. "Is everything okay? You seem a little distracted lately." She looked up, startled, as if I had caught her doing something she shouldn't. "What? No, everything's fine. Just a bit tired, that's all. Work's been hectic, you know." I nodded, trying to believe her, but the unease in my chest only grew. "Yeah, I get it. Maybe we should plan a weekend away, just the two of us. Get some time to relax and reconnect." "Yeah, maybe," she said, her voice trailing off as she got up from the table, her phone still clutched tightly in her hand. "But I think we should talk about it later. I'm going to check on the kids." I watched her walk away, feeling an unfamiliar distance between us. Sarah and I had been married for nearly 10 years, and we had weathered our fair share of storms. But this felt different. This felt like something was slipping away, and I wasn't sure how to hold on to it. Over the next few days, the signs became harder to ignore. She started coming to bed later and later, often claiming she had work to finish or that she was too wired to sleep. When she did finally crawl into bed, she would lie as far away from me as possible, her back turned, as if she couldn't bear the thought of even the smallest physical contact. The warmth that used to be between us was gone, replaced by an icy void. One evening, as we were sitting in the living room, I tried to break the silence that had become so common between us. "Sarah, is there something you want to talk about? You've seemed really distant lately." She sighed, her eyes not leaving the TV. "I'm just tired, Jacob. There's nothing wrong." "Are you sure? Because it feels like something's changed. We barely talk anymore. You don't seem interested in anything I say." She finally turned to face me, irritation flashing in her eyes. "I told you, I'm just tired. Why do you keep pushing this?" "Because I care, Sarah. I care about us." "Well, maybe you should stop caring so much," she snapped, before standing up and leaving the room. Her words hit me like a punch to the gut. Stop caring so much. When did caring become a problem? I sat there in stunned silence, trying to process what had just happened. This wasn't like her. Something was definitely wrong, and I was determined to find out what it was. As I lay in bed that night, staring at the ceiling, I knew I couldn't ignore the signs any longer. Sarah was pulling away from me, and I had to find out why. The thought of losing her, of losing everything we had built together, was unbearable. But I couldn't shake the feeling that something was terribly wrong, something that went beyond just being tired or stressed. I didn't want to believe that there was another man, another person who had captured her attention, her heart. But as the days went on, The possibility grew harder to deny. And so, with a heavy heart and a mind racing with fear and suspicion, I made the decision to investigate further. I had to know the truth, no matter how much it hurt. The nagging feeling in my gut wouldn't go away. Every time I looked at Sarah, every time she brushed me off with a flimsy excuse, the unease only grew. I couldn't stand it anymore. I needed answers, real answers, not the half-hearted reassurances she kept giving me. It was a Saturday afternoon when I decided to take matters into my own hands. Sarah had taken the kids to a friend's birthday party, leaving me alone in the house. I sat in our living room, staring at my phone, my mind racing. I didn't want to do this. I didn't want to be that husband, the one who spies on his wife because he's too paranoid to trust her. But I couldn't ignore the signs any longer. Something was wrong, and I needed to know what. I started by checking her phone. She was usually careful, keeping it with her at all times, but in her rush to leave, she had forgotten it on the kitchen counter. My heart pounded as I picked it up, feeling a wave of guilt wash over me. This was my wife, the woman I had vowed to love and trust. But here I was, about to invade her privacy because I couldn't shake the feeling that she was hiding something from me. As I unlocked her phone, I felt a knot tighten in my stomach. What was I hoping to find? Or rather, what was I dreading to find? I quickly scrolled through her recent messages, looking for anything out of the ordinary. Most of them were mundane. Texts with friends, reminders for appointments, and updates from work. But then, I saw a name that made my heart stop. Tyler. Tyler was our babysitter, a 22-year-old college student we had hired a few months ago. He was great with the kids, responsible, friendly, and always eager to help. But what would Sarah be texting him about? I opened the message thread, my hand shaking as I scrolled through the conversation. At first, the text seemed innocent enough. Discussions about the kids' schedules, reminders about when we needed him to come over. But as I kept reading, the tone of the messages changed. They became more personal, more intimate. Tyler. Had a great time with the kids today. They're really growing up fast. Sarah. Yeah, they really are. Thanks for taking such good care of them. It means a lot to me. Tyler. You know I'm always here for you, Sarah. Whenever you need me. Sarah. I know. And I appreciate it more than you know. My breath caught in my throat. This wasn't how you talk to your babysitter. The messages had a flirty undertone, something I hadn't noticed before. My pulse quickened as I scrolled further, my eyes scanning each text for more clues. Then I saw it, the message that shattered whatever hope I had left. Tyler. Last night was amazing. Can't stop thinking about you. Sarah. Me too. I wish we had more time together. I felt like the ground had been ripped out from under me. My worst fears were confirmed, staring back at me from the screen. The woman I loved, the mother of my children, had betrayed me with a boy barely out of college. My hands trembled as I put the phone down, the enormity of the situation crashing over me. I couldn't just confront her, not yet. I needed more evidence, something undeniable. My IT background gave me the tools I needed. I knew exactly how to dig deeper, to find out the full extent of their betrayal. With a sense of grim determination, I decided to install a spy app on her phone. It was something I had never imagined doing. But I had to know everything. The truth, no matter how painful, was the only way forward. When Sarah returned home later that evening, I played it cool, pretending nothing had changed. It took every ounce of strength I had to look at her and not let my anger and hurt show. She acted normal, as if everything was fine, as if she wasn't ripping our family apart behind my back. Over the next few days, the app began to collect data, texts, call logs, even recordings of their conversations. Each new piece of evidence was like a dagger to the heart, but I forced myself to go through it all. I needed to know how deep this went. One evening, as I was reviewing the latest recordings in my home office, Sarah walked in, surprising me. I quickly minimized the window on my computer, my heart racing. "Hey, what are you up to?" she asked, her tone casual. "Just finishing up some work," I replied, trying to keep my voice steady. She leaned against the doorframe, her eyes scanning the room. "You've been spending a lot of time in here lately. Everything okay?" "Yeah, just a big project at work," I lied, trying to stay on top of things. She nodded, but I could see the suspicion in her eyes. "Don't overwork yourself. We miss you out there." I forced a smile, hating the way I had to deceive her even as she deceived me. "I'll be out in a bit. Just need to wrap this up." She lingered for a moment longer, then finally turned and left the room. I waited until I was sure she was gone, then reopened the window on my computer, staring at the damning evidence in front of me. My heart ached with betrayal, but I knew I had to stay strong. This wasn't just about me. This was about my children, my family. I couldn't let Sarah and Tyler get away with this, not without facing the consequences. The next day, I confronted Tyler. It was early evening, and he had just arrived at our house to babysit the kids. I caught him in the hallway, just as he was about to head to the living room. My voice was cold and controlled as I spoke, but the anger boiled just beneath the surface. "Tyler, we need to talk." He looked at me, surprised by my serious tone. "Sure, Jacob. What's up?" I took a deep breath, fighting to keep my composure. "I know what's been going on between you and Sarah." His face paled, and I saw the panic flicker in his eyes. I don't know what you're talking about." "Don't play dumb with me," I snapped, stepping closer. "I have everything. Texts, calls, even recordings. I know what you've been doing." Tyler swallowed hard, his bravado crumbling. "Jacob, I'm sorry. I didn't mean for this to happen." "Sorry doesn't cut it," I said, my voice firm. "You're going to quit this job, stay away from my family, and write an apology letter to my children explaining why they won't see you again. Do you understand?" He nodded quickly, his eyes wide with fear. "I'll do it. I'll do whatever you want. Please, just don't tell anyone." "That's up to you, Tyler," I said, my voice icy. "But if you ever come near my family again, I won't hesitate to make sure everyone knows exactly what you've done." Tyler nodded again, clearly shaken, and I turned to walk away, leaving him standing in the hallway, pale and trembling. It wasn't over yet. I still had to confront Sarah, but at least I had taken the first step toward reclaiming control over my life. The truth was out, and now it was time to face the consequences. Keeping up the charade was one of the hardest things I had ever done. After discovering Sarah's affair and confronting Tyler, I knew I had to keep my composure until I was ready to confront Sarah. I was living a double life. On the surface, I was still the loving husband and devoted father. But underneath, I was a man betrayed, seething with anger and hurt. Every day felt like walking on a tightrope, balancing between the facade I maintained and the storm of emotions brewing inside me. The mornings were the worst. Waking up next to her, feeling the warmth of her body beside mine, was a cruel reminder of what I had lost. I would lay there, staring at the ceiling, wondering how she could lie there so peacefully, knowing what she had done. I would slip out of bed quietly, careful not to wake her, and go to the bathroom where I could be alone with my thoughts. I'd stare at my reflection in the mirror, trying to reconcile the man I saw with the one I used to be. Some mornings, I'd splash cold water on my face, hoping it would shock me out of the nightmare my life had become. Other times, I would just stand there, gripping the edge of the sink, willing myself to get through another day without breaking. It was all about control, keeping myself in check until the time was right. Sarah, on the other hand, seemed blissfully unaware. She went about her days as if nothing had changed, her smile just as bright, her laughter just as carefree. It made me sick to see how easily she could pretend. But I was just as guilty. I had become an expert at pretending, too. The mask I wore became my armor, protecting me from the pain while I plotted my next move. One evening, after putting the kids to bed, Sarah and I sat in the living room, the television flickering in the background. It was one of those rare moments when we were alone, just the two of us, without the usual distractions. I could feel the tension in the air, but I forced myself to act normal, to keep up the pretense. "Jacob, you've been quiet lately," Sarah said, breaking the silence. "Is everything okay?" I glanced at her, forcing a smile. "Yeah, just work stuff. It's been a bit stressful." She reached over and placed her hand on mine, her touch sending a jolt of anger through me. "You know you can talk to me, right? We're in this together." Her words felt like a slap in the face. Together. How could she say that after everything she'd done? But I swallowed my anger, nodding instead. "I know. Thanks, Sarah." She smiled, seemingly satisfied with my response, and turned her attention back to the TV. I stared at the screen, the images blurring as I fought to keep my emotions in check. Inside, I was screaming, but outwardly, I remained calm, my mask firmly in place. As the days passed, the strain of keeping up appearances began to wear on me. I found myself avoiding Sarah whenever possible, making excuses to stay late at work, or taking on extra projects just to stay out of the house. The guilt and betrayal weighed heavily on me, but I knew I had to stay strong. I couldn't let her see that I was unraveling. One afternoon, I was in my office, trying to focus on a project, when my phone buzzed with a new notification from the spy app. My heart raced as I opened the app, scanning through the latest messages between Sarah and Tyler. They were planning to meet later that evening while I was supposedly working late. I clenched my fists, the anger boiling up inside me. I couldn't stand it anymore. The lies, the deceit, it was all too much. I had to confront her, but I couldn't do it without a plan. I needed to make sure that when I finally revealed what I knew, there would be no way for her to deny it. No room for excuses. That evening, as I prepared to leave for work, Sarah stood in the kitchen, making dinner. She glanced up at me, a smile on her face. "You're leaving early today. What's the occasion?" "Just a lot to catch up on," I replied, slipping into my jacket. "I'll probably be back late, so don't wait up." She nodded, turning back to the stove. "Okay, I'll save you a plate." I watched her for a moment, feeling a mix of sadness and anger. How could she be so casual, so indifferent? But I forced myself to stay calm, to keep the mask on. "Thanks," I said, my voice steady. As I left the house, I couldn't shake the feeling of dread that settled over me. Tonight would be the night. I would finally confront her and force her to face the truth. But for now, I had to play the part, keep up the act until the time was right. Later that night, I returned home earlier than I had told Sarah. I parked down the street, out of sight, and walked back to the house quietly. The lights were on, and I could see shadows moving behind the curtains. My heart pounded in my chest as I approached the door, my mind racing with thoughts of what I was about to do. I took a deep breath, steeling myself for what was to come, and unlocked the door as quietly as possible. The sound of laughter greeted me, a sound that once brought me joy but now felt like a dagger to the heart. I crept down the hallway, my footsteps silent on the carpet, until I reached the living room. There they were, Sarah and Tyler, sitting on the couch, laughing together like nothing was wrong, like they hadn't been betraying me behind my back. I stood there for a moment, watching them, my anger rising with each passing second. Finally, I stepped into the room, my voice cold and controlled. "Enjoying yourselves?" They both jumped, their laughter dying instantly as they turned to face me. Sarah's eyes widened in shock, while Tyler looked like a deer caught in headlights. "Jacob, you're home early," Sarah stammered, her face paling. "Yes," I said, stepping closer, my gaze fixed on Tyler. I thought I'd join the party. Tyler stood up, backing away slightly, his voice shaky. "Jacob, we were just... Save it." I cut him off, my voice low and dangerous. "I know everything." Sarah looked at me, her eyes wide with fear. "Jacob, please, let me explain." "Explain?" I interrupted, my voice rising. "What is there to explain, Sarah? You've been lying to me for months, sneaking around with him while I was working to provide for our family." Tears welled up in her eyes, but I didn't care. I was done playing the fool. "I trusted you, Sarah. I gave you everything, and this is how you repay me." "Jacob, I'm sorry," she whispered, her voice trembling. "I never meant for this to happen. I didn't want to hurt you." "But you did," I said, my voice cold. "And now you're going to face the consequences." I turned to Tyler, who was standing there, looking like he wanted to disappear. "You're done here, Tyler. You're going to quit this job and stay away from my family. And if you ever come near us again, I will make sure everyone knows what you've done." Tyler nodded quickly, his face pale. "I understand, Jacob. I'm sorry. I'll leave." "Good," I said, my tone final. "Now get out." Tyler didn't need to be told twice. He practically ran out of the house, leaving Sarah and me alone in the room. The silence that followed was deafening, the weight of what had just happened settling over us. Sarah looked at me, tears streaming down her face. "Jacob, I'm so sorry. I don't know what I was thinking. Please, can we work this out?" I shook my head, the mask I had worn for so long finally falling away. "No, Sarah. This marriage is over. I'll be filing for divorce, and I want you out of the house by the end of the week." Her face crumpled, and she began to sob, but I didn't feel any sympathy. The woman I had loved was gone, replaced by someone I no longer recognized. As I turned to leave the room, I felt a strange sense of relief. The mask was gone, and with it, the burden of pretending. Now it was time to rebuild my life, piece by piece, and leave this betrayal behind me. The day I decided to confront Sarah was marked by a heavy tension in the air, the kind that settles deep into your bones and refuses to let go. I had planned everything meticulously, ensuring that every detail was in place. The evidence I had collected over the past weeks, texts, call logs, and video recordings, was laid out, ready to be presented. My emotions were a turbulent mix of anger, sadness, and determination, but I knew I had to stay calm, controlled, and focused. This was not just about revenge. It was about reclaiming my life and making sure Sarah understood the gravity of her betrayal. Sarah had been out for most of the day, and when she returned home, I was sitting at the kitchen table, waiting for her. The house was quiet, with the kids spending the evening with my parents. This confrontation was one I didn't want them to witness, and I needed the space to speak freely. She walked into the kitchen, her keys jingling in her hand, her face lighting up with a smile when she saw me. But that smile quickly faded when she noticed the serious expression on my face and the stack of papers in front of me. "Jacob," she asked, her voice tinged with concern. "What's going on?" "Sit down, Sarah," I said, my voice steady, though my heart was racing. I gestured to the chair across from me. She hesitated, clearly sensing that something was wrong, but eventually she sat down, placing her hands nervously on the table. "You're scaring me. What's this about?" I looked her in the eyes, trying to find a trace of the woman I had once loved, but all I saw was the mask she had worn so convincingly. "Sarah, I need you to be honest with me. No more lies. No more pretending. I know about you and Tyler." Her eyes widened, her face turning pale. For a moment, she looked like she might faint, but she quickly composed herself, shaking her head. "Jacob, I don't know what you're talking about. Don't lie to me," I said, my voice firm but controlled. I pushed the stack of papers toward her. "This is everything, Sarah. The texts, the calls, the video recordings. I know exactly what's been going on between you two." She stared at the papers, her hands trembling as she reached for them. Slowly, she began to flip through the pages, her eyes scanning the damning evidence. Tears welled up in her eyes, and she covered her mouth with her hand, as if trying to stifle a sob. "Jacob, she stammered, her voice barely above a whisper. "I never meant for you to find out like this." "Find out like what, Sarah?" I snapped, the anger I had been holding back finally bubbling to the surface. That you've been cheating on me with a 22-year-old babysitter. That you've been lying to my face every single day. How long were you planning to keep this up? She couldn't meet my eyes, her gaze fixed on the papers in front of her. I don't know. I wasn't thinking. I was lonely, Jacob. You've been so busy with work, and I felt like you didn't care anymore. I shook my head, disbelief and anger swirling inside me. So your solution was to sleep with someone else, someone we trusted to take care of our children. How could you do this to me, to our family? She looked up at me then, tears streaming down her face. I'm sorry, Jacob. I'm so sorry. I know I've hurt you, and I know I've made a terrible mistake. But can't we fix this? Can't we find a way to move past it? Her words felt like a slap in the face. Move past it? Sarah, you shattered our trust. How can I ever believe anything you say again? She reached out to touch my hand, but I pulled away, the distance between us growing with every passing second. Please, Jacob, I love you. I don't want to lose you. I stood up, pushing my chair back with a scrape that echoed through the quiet room. It's too late, Sarah. You already lost me the moment you decided to betray me. This marriage is over. She broke down then, sobbing uncontrollably, her head in her hands. The sight should have broken my heart, but all I felt was an emptiness, a coldness that had settled deep within me. Jacob, please, don't do this. We can go to counseling. We can work through this. I'll do anything. I shook my head, resolute. The only thing you can do now, Sarah, is pack your things and leave. I've already filed for divorce, and I want you out of the house by the end of the week. Her sobs grew louder, her body shaking with the force of her emotions. Where am I supposed to go? What about the kids? The kids will stay with me, I said, my voice hard. You'll get visitation, but they're staying here. As for where you go, that's your problem. You made this mess, Sarah, and now you have to live with the consequences. She looked up at me, her face a mixture of devastation and desperation. Jacob, please, don't do this. I know I messed up, but I still love you. We can get through this, I know we can. I felt a pang of sadness, a fleeting glimpse of the love we once shared, but it was quickly overshadowed by the reality of her betrayal. I'm sorry, Sarah, but I can't do this anymore. I deserve better than this. Without another word, I turned and left the room, leaving her to her tears. As I walked up the stairs to our bedroom, the room that had once been a sanctuary, now tainted by lies and deceit, I felt a strange sense of relief. The confrontation was over, and with it, the charade I had been living. There was still pain, still anger, but I knew that I was finally... I had already called ahead, asking him to meet me in a quiet corner of the nearby park. He sounded hesitant but agreed, probably thinking that I wanted to discuss something about the kids. He had no idea what was coming. The park was nearly empty, the late afternoon sun casting long shadows across the ground. I arrived early, sitting on a bench that faced a small pond, my mind replaying everything I wanted to say to him. The evidence I had gathered was tucked safely into a folder at my side, ready to be used if necessary. After a few minutes, I saw him approaching from the parking lot, his casual stride and carefree demeanor a stark contrast to the storm brewing inside me. When he spotted me, he gave a small wave, but his smile faltered when he noticed the serious expression on my face. Hey, Jacob, he said as he reached the bench. What's up? You wanted to talk about something. I gestured for him to sit down, my voice calm but firm. Sit down, Tyler. We need to have a serious conversation. He hesitated for a moment, clearly sensing that something was wrong, but eventually, he sat down beside me. Okay, what's going on? I turned to face him, my eyes locking onto his. I know about you and Sarah. The color drained from his face, his eyes widening in shock. He opened his mouth to speak, but no words came out. Instead, he just stared at me, his fear and guilt written all over his face. I've known for weeks, I continued, not letting him off the hook. I have all the evidence, texts, call logs, even video recordings. I know exactly what you've been doing behind my back. Jacob, I didn't. He stammered, struggling to find the right words. I'm so sorry. It wasn't supposed to happen. I never meant to hurt you or your family. Save your apologies, I snapped, my voice cold and unforgiving. You knew exactly what you were doing, Tyler. You took advantage of my trust, of my family, and now you're going to face the consequences. He hung his head, unable to meet my gaze. I know I messed up. I know I deserve whatever's coming. But please, Jacob, I swear, I never meant to hurt the kids. They mean a lot to me. I shook my head, my anger simmering just beneath the surface. You're done, Tyler. You're never coming near my family again. I want you to quit your job as our babysitter, and I don't want to see you anywhere near my house or my children. Do you understand? He nodded quickly, his hands trembling as he fidgeted with the hem of his shirt. I understand. I'll quit. I'll stay away. I promise. That's not all. I continued, my voice hardening. You're going to write an apology letter to my kids. They may not understand what happened now, but one day they will, and I want them to know that you were the one who wronged them. I want them to know that you're the reason their family fell apart. Tyler looked up at me, his eyes wide with a mixture of fear and regret. I'll write the letter, Jacob. I'll do whatever you want. I'm so sorry. I really am. I studied his face, searching for any sign of sincerity. For a moment, I saw a flicker of something. Maybe it was genuine remorse, maybe it was just fear of the consequences. But it didn't matter. What mattered was that he was going to be out of our lives for good. Good, I said, standing up from the bench. You've got until the end of the week to send me that letter. After that, I don't want to see or hear from you again. If you ever come near my family, I'll make sure everyone knows exactly what you did. Tyler nodded, his face pale and drawn. You won't hear from me again. I swear. I turned away from him, not wanting to waste any more time on this pathetic excuse for a man. As I walked back to my car, I felt a weight lifting from my shoulders. It wasn't complete closure. I knew the scars from this betrayal would take a long time to heal, but it was a step in the right direction. I had faced the betrayer, and I had made sure that he would never be a part of my life again. The weeks that followed the confrontations were a whirlwind of emotions and adjustments. With Sarah and Tyler out of the picture, I was left with the daunting task of picking up the pieces of my shattered life and trying to rebuild a sense of normalcy for myself and my children. I started with the practical aspects, finding a new babysitter, reorganizing the household routine, and addressing the financial implications of the divorce. But the emotional side was far more challenging. Each day felt like a balancing act between managing my grief, staying strong for my kids, and dealing with the myriad of logistical issues that came with ending a marriage. One afternoon, I sat down with my children, Emily and Jake, at the kitchen table. They had been remarkably resilient, but I knew that they were feeling the strain of the upheaval. They deserved honesty, but I also needed to be careful about how I approached the conversation. Dad, can we talk? Emily, my 8-year-old, asked, her eyes wide and earnest. Jake, who was 6, was sitting quietly next to her, clutching his favorite stuffed animal. Sure, sweetie, I said, trying to keep my tone as warm and reassuring as possible. What's on your mind? Emily took a deep breath, her small hands resting on the table. Why did Mom leave us? And why is Tyler not coming back? I sighed, gathering my thoughts. Mom and Tyler had a falling out, and it was something that made it impossible for them to stay. I know it's confusing, and it's okay to feel upset about it. Jake looked up at me, his big blue eyes filled with curiosity. Is Mom coming back? I felt a pang of sadness, but forced a gentle smile. No, Jake, Mom won't be coming back. But you and Emily will be staying with me, and we're going to be okay. We're a family, and we'll get through this together. Emily nodded slowly, absorbing the news. I miss Mom, But I'm glad you're here, Dad. I reached across the table, giving both of them a reassuring pat on the hands. I miss her too, but we have each other, and that's what matters. We're going to make a new routine, and we'll find ways to have fun and be happy. As we wrapped up the conversation, I noticed the weight on their shoulders seemed to lighten a bit. It was a small victory, but it gave me hope that we could find our way through this. Later that week, I met with a family counselor, Dr. Martin, to discuss the best ways to support my children through this transition. Dr. Martin was a calm, compassionate woman with years of experience helping families navigate tough times. "Jacob," she began, "it's clear that you're doing everything you can to make this transition as smooth as possible for Emily and Jake. But remember, they're also processing a lot of emotions. It's important to encourage open communication and be patient with them." "I've tried to be as open as I can," I replied. "But sometimes I don't know how much to say or how to explain things." "That's completely understandable," Dr. Martin said with a reassuring smile. "Kids often need reassurance that their feelings are valid. It's also helpful to establish a routine and make time for activities that bring joy and comfort. They'll need to see that life can still be enjoyable, even after such a big change." I took her advice to heart and began implementing a new routine for the kids, focusing on activities that they enjoyed and found comforting. We started having family movie nights, baking together on weekends, and setting aside time for one-on-one conversations. Slowly but surely, we began to rebuild our sense of normalcy. One evening, as we were baking cookies together, Jake looked up at me with a small, hopeful smile. "Dad, can we keep making cookies like this every week?" I chuckled, ruffling his hair. "Absolutely, buddy. We can make cookies every week if that's what you want. It's our new tradition." Emily, who was carefully measuring flour, added, "And maybe we can invite Grandma over sometimes. She always tells the best stories." "That sounds like a great idea," I agreed. "Grandma would love to join us. We'll make sure to include her." As the weeks turned into months, the pain of the past began to ease, replaced by a renewed sense of hope and connection. I was still healing, but I was doing it alongside my children, and that made all the difference. We were creating new memories and finding joy in the little things, one cookie at a time. It wasn't a perfect solution, and there were still tough days ahead, but I felt stronger knowing that I was doing my best for my family. Picking up the pieces was a gradual process, but with each small step forward, we were learning to live our new reality and finding a way to be happy again. With time, the raw edges of betrayal and heartache began to smooth out, revealing a clearer path forward. The house, once filled with tension and uncertainty, now echoed with the laughter of my children and the hum of a new routine. As I navigated this transition, I began to see the potential for growth and renewal, not just for my family, but for myself as well. One sunny Saturday morning, I decided it was time to focus on my own personal growth. I had always put my career and family first, but now was the moment to invest in myself. I enrolled in a local community college course on digital marketing, something I'd been interested in for years, but never had the chance to pursue. It was a small step, but it felt monumental. While I was preparing for my first class, Emily and Jake were at a friend's birthday party. I took advantage of the quiet to reflect on how far we had come. The kitchen, where we had shared so many poignant conversations, was now a place of comfort and new beginnings. That afternoon, I received a call from my best friend, Mark, who had been a steadfast supporter throughout this ordeal. "Hey, Jacob, how's it going?" Mark's voice was upbeat, but I could hear the concern underlying his words. "Hey, Mark." "Things are looking up," I said, feeling a sense of pride. "I started a course in digital marketing. It's something I've always wanted to do." "Wow, that's awesome," Mark exclaimed. "I'm really glad to hear that. It sounds like you're turning things around." "Yeah, I guess I am," I admitted. "It feels good to focus on something positive, something that's for me." That's exactly what you need right now. You've been through a lot. This is your time to reclaim your life and do something for yourself. I appreciate that, I said. It feels like the right move, and it's exciting to think about where this could lead. Later that week, I went to my first class, nervously clutching my notebook as I walked into the bustling community college. The room was filled with a mix of ages and backgrounds, all eager to learn. As I took my seat, I felt a mixture of anxiety and exhilaration. "Welcome, everyone." The instructor, a dynamic woman named Lisa, greeted us. "I'm excited to have you all here. Let's make this a great experience." I immersed myself in the coursework, finding joy in learning new concepts and meeting new people. The course provided a much-needed distraction and a sense of purpose. It was a chance to rediscover my passions and build a future that was entirely my own. One evening, after a particularly challenging but rewarding class, I returned home to find Emily and Jake waiting for me at the kitchen table. They had been working on a surprise project for me. "Look what we made," Emily said, her eyes sparkling with excitement. Jake held up a homemade welcome back banner, decorated with colorful drawings and stickers. "It's to celebrate you starting your new course," Jake explained, beaming with pride. I was touched by their gesture. "This is amazing, guys. Thank you so much. It means a lot to me." Emily hugged me tightly. "We're proud of you, Dad. We know you're doing something great." As we sat down to dinner, the atmosphere was warm and supportive. The little things, like celebrating new beginnings and supporting each other, had become a cornerstone of our new life. In the weeks that followed, I continued to balance my studies with my responsibilities at home. The new routine was not without its challenges, but it also brought a sense of accomplishment and renewal. I was slowly rebuilding my confidence and finding strength in the process of creating a new life for myself and my children. One evening, as I was working on an assignment, Emily and Jake joined me at the kitchen table with their own projects. Emily was drawing, and Jake was playing with building blocks. "You know," Emily said thoughtfully, "sometimes it's hard to understand why things happen the way they do. But I think it's really cool that we're all working on new things and trying to be happy." I looked at her, feeling the surge of pride. "You're right, Emily. It's not always easy, but we're learning and growing together. And that's what matters." Jake looked up, his face serious but hopeful. "Do you think we'll be even happier in the future?" I smiled, reaching out to ruffle his hair. "I believe so. We're taking positive steps, and we're strong. We'll make our future bright." As I looked at my children, I realized that despite the pain and challenges, there was a profound sense of empowerment in moving forward. The journey was far from over, but with each step, we were creating a new chapter, one filled with possibilities and hope. It was a testament to our resilience, and a reminder that even after the darkest times, new beginnings could emerge.